2016 Planning Commission meeting to order. First order of business is agenda changes. Does anyone have any agenda changes for the night? Okay. We'll move on to item number 2. Public comments for non-agenda items. I think everybody's here for town plan revision, so we will move on to item number 3, which is town plan revisions. Discuss possible revisions based on feedback to date. So hopefully everybody has had a chance to read what actually turned out to be quite a bit of written response on the town plan. I thought that a lot of it was substantive, a lot of it was fairly particular. And especially what struck me in response from the CCRPC was something that we should recognize and make amendments for. But I wondered what the best way to go about it was. Probably given the amount of data, it needs some structure to go through it before the board.
So you have a couple different batches of comments, right? There's Don's minutes from the public hearing,
Right.
which provides you a record of all of the verbal commentary, and then you have the written, the email correspondence, which I put together in a packet, and you received a bit more tonight when you walked in, and then there's the RPC comments. So I don't know which one you want to go through first, Joe. To my mind, some of the comments from both the public hearing and at the RPC level are either minor, clarifying, some typos. I'm not sure you need to discuss those. I'm happy to just
No.
make those changes. Many of the RPC recommendations, I think, are it would be helpful if this piece of information was added, or it would be good.
Right.
And again, I don't see that being just fodder for discussion unless you want it to
Right.
be. I figure that's just marching orders, they're good suggestions, why not?
I think
Make an
it's
attempt
marching
to-
orders. Probably the most substantive thing I found in the CCRPC was one section they thought was missing, or one statement that they thought was missing.
Yeah,
under water
in fact, they
quality.
had one sort of like, this is not gonna pass muster comment, and that was reference, the statute requires a reference to the
Yeah.
basin plans.
Yeah.
And apparently we didn't have that in there. So that's, again, Emily provided some context and an example of how to do that, so I have no problem,
Okay.
making that happen. All of her comments, basically, I think I can address. There are a couple that I don't think I'm not sure they need a change. It's more of like she wasn't clear on where things were. But most of them, I think, are just fairly simple changes.
So
Okay.
the state requirements category on that first page, you're suggesting we just take that and drop it into the town plan?
Find
Her wording.
find the appropriate place. Not necessarily
find
her
the
wording,
appropriate
but I
place.
think she gave the town of Essex town plan as an
Right, she
example.
quoted the
Yeah. Yep.
statement.
And there's a logical place for that in, I believe there's a logical place for that in the natural
in the
resources
natural
section.
resources section,
Yeah.
I would expect.
Similarly, she mentioned the all hazard mitigation plan and whether some of those items in it should rise to the level of actual action items. So I can look at that with Al Barber and see if there is something in there that maybe should be mentioned in the town plan. I'm not 100% sure there is, actually, but I haven't looked at it in some time, so.
She asked whether the town did participate in the development of the North Lake Champlain Basin Plan. Did we?
Not substantively, no. No, I think our partner watershed groups provided some input. Lewis Creek Association, La Platte Watershed Partnership, but no, the town didn't. Nothing really
And you
substantive.
don't see that as a requirement that we need to go back and pick up that particular
No.
response?
Her comment was simply that we need to recognize there is a basin plan, mention it, and if
Right.
there's any kind of tie-ins to what we're doing, which she indicated there probably are, given that we have some water quality concerns,
Right.
just to roll those in. So again, I'm happy to just, with your blessing, just basically make the changes that Emily recommended from the RPC level. I'm also happy to make all of the typographical clarifying changes that Rob Bass and others mentioned at the public hearing. So I thought from your standpoint, as a policy board, you might want to talk about the more substantive suggestions that came out of the public hearing or are in the written suggestions instead of the.
Most of those, from what I recall, the public hearing are actually in the written responses rather than, in the commentary that was part
Yeah,
of the meeting.
I agree. I don't remember anything at the public hearing that was challenging, really, what was
Yeah.
in the plan. A couple of omissions, maybe, a couple of clarifying, one table didn't match another kind of a thing, but
Right.
the written comments seem to be more, you forgot
Yeah.
this, or I don't like where you're going with this, or what
Mhm.
have you.
I thought there was one thing in particular that was mentioned during the public hearing, and that was the question about whether or not an attorney had reviewed
Oh, yeah.
the town plan. And you pointed out that that hasn't been the case in the past with any of this kind of document, this town plan kind of document. That gentleman asked about whether that was going to be done.
Right, and I said it's not been our common practice
Not been a
to.
common
to
practice.
do
I
that.
would suggest that we do make it a common practice. I think it's important that our language be looked at by an attorney so that we don't get ourselves in trouble down the line. And that's happened before. We already have the deal with Lot 15 where there was vague instructions to the DRB that they weren't quite sure what to do with this. I'm talking about 7 years ago when it first came in, Joe, not since that time. And we don't have a budget to get any kind of legal advice.
And my opinion on this is whatever the DRB was given wasn't really out of the town plan. The town plan is a guiding and empowering document, it's not bylaw. Right? Number two, we're talking about something that's, substantial, it's very, very big. And the contents of it are guided by state statute.
It doesn't have anything to do with the legal language, Joe. The contents do.
It's a visionary document. I mean, I'm sorry, but I deal enough with lawyers to know that the language they produce really doesn't jive with town plan vision.
Well, for example, Alex pointed out that this is a conceptual document. This is something that we use to look at when we produce a zoning regulation or a subdivision regulation where there is hard language that says
No.
we shall do that
Well,
or we
it's-
shall not
it's-
do that.
I would say it's an empowering document. It allows the planning commission to look into creating bylaw. Right? The planning commission would not go and do something that isn't, pointed out or alluded to in the town plan. Right? I look at the town plan as the empowering document. The discussion behind the bylaw is yet another level, and that's what, that's what people are gonna get held to, with, with zoning. And, if you were to pick something that you want, legal, overview of, right, and is likely to get you into court, it's the bylaw, not the town plan.
Well, I disagree because there are references from the town plan that create the bylaws, and the challenges have come when a developer, someone wanting to do something on some part of our town, looked at the bylaws, went back to the town plan to get, why did you propose this bylaw? And if that why is not clearly stated in the town plan, then that gets challenged.
The very thought of, I work for a lawyer now, of how much it would cost to have an attorney at $200 an hour sit down and compare the entire town plan to the, I mean, that's just not feasible.
We don't know that. We don't know whether that's feasible or not. And I think it should be compared to how much the town has spent on legal issues having to do with the bylaws and the town plan in the past. It would seem to me fairly simple to ask an attorney to give us a proposal to review the town plan.
So great, so how about right now we work on finishing the town plan?
That's fine,
And
I'm just
sending it to
saying,
the select board, and maybe while it's at the select board, we could have that discussion. But right now, maybe we could focus on completing the plan.
I'm not saying we shouldn't focus on completing the plan. I'm saying that when the plan is complete, and that's what the gentleman at the town hearing was asking, as I heard it, are you going to do this when the town plan is complete? When you bring this to the town for the 2 hearings that the select board has to hold, are you before that going to have an attorney go through the language and look at it?
Yes, I heard that.
And
So, but
That's
right-
the time to
Mhm.
do it, but the question is, it seems in your mind, and I guess other people's mind, whether that's necessary.
I
And
think-
I argue that it is necessary. I argue
I-
that this
I
is
disagree
more than
strongly.
a background.
So I
The-
can offer a little bit of helpful guidance, because we just had our Vermont Planners Fall Conference last Friday. It focused on legal matters. We even had a quiz during the middle of the conference where we split up into teams and they flashed plan and regulatory language with a question of, is this enforceable or not, based on the way it's worded. And it was all based on actual case law. They were pulling language from cases that had been litigated. So a couple things. One, Joe's right. The plan is an aspirational visionary document. It's not a regulation. But John's right as well, because it is used in a regulatory context during Act 250 proceedings and at the Public Service Board level. So it lives in this strange world where at the town level, we don't look to the town plan to hold a developer's feet to the fire, but at the Act 250 level, the district commission doesn't look at our regulations, they look at our town plan to
Right.
see whether a project meets some of the criteria in Act 250. With that said, I can do a quick survey of other towns and whether, if it matters to you, whether having a legal review of a town plan is a common practice in Vermont, especially in Chittenden County where we have more robust planning efforts. Just to see, I don't think it is, but I could find out. The other thing that I've learned in years of practice and last Friday is that there's not a lot of magic to an attorney's review of a document to see whether language is enforceable. It's not rocket science. It has a lot to do with the words that you used. So if you use encourage, if you use would, if you use words like we favor this, we discourage that. Those are all permissive. That's all permissive language, which will not be deemed strict in terms of being used in a regulatory context. The way words like shall, will, must, right, those kinds of words.
Right.
So I'm not sure that an attorney is necessarily what's needed here. I think what maybe could be done is you and me walk right through the plan language and see what level of these action items and language are sort of wishy-washy and which ones are actually very solid, and understand that they're not all going to be solid. You have to use wishy-washy terms sometimes, and that becomes a policy question of whether you want to be encouraging something or requiring something.
Because it's aspirational. If you used a word like shall or must on every one of the hundreds of, recommendations we just put in this plan, you would sink yourself, right? The board acknowledges that the majority of those things aren't gonna get done in 1 or 3 or 5 years.
Well, that's part of it. I think
Longer term
the other
effects.
part is not just the capacity to get them done, but also the community's capacity to have made that decision already. many times in a town plan, you would like to do further research, further investigation, and in those cases, you necessarily are not going to have definitive thou shalt language because you need to do additional follow-up work. But there may be plenty of things that you all feel very strongly about that should have the thou shalt language, and maybe it's just a matter of walking through the plan, you know, with that legal hat on, and, you know, giving it one more pass through, either at this level or the select board level, you know, what have you.
Well, for example, there's a section under the village area, under goal 3.1, that says consider a larger size cap for grocery stores in the village and the village northwest zoning district rather than the existing 20,000 square foot limit applied to all retail uses in these districts. That sounds pretty specific to me, Joe. It does begin with consider.
No. What it
The rest of that sentence says some very specific things.
What it says to me is that the board, right, is empowered to look at that question about whether it should be done or not. Until the board decides to do it, the bylaw for a zone is the bylaw for a zone. The DRB, right, will, you know, review a proposal based on the current bylaws and will accept or reject based on current bylaws. And if the applicant wants to go to environmental court, right, and complain about it, tough. That's what's in the bylaws. That's what the environmental court judge is going to look at.
Yeah, and in that case, if it were at the Act 250 level, and a party brought up that section of the plan and said, see, it looks like the town is thinking about changing this, any judge would look at that language and say, yes, that's what it seems like, but they haven't changed it yet, and we don't even know which way they might change it, because it says consider and think about. So that's an example of language that would hold no legal weight.
Because it uses the word consider.
Right, but it shouldn't hold any legal weight, because this board hasn't made any decisions about whether that's a good idea. That's a good example of one where you want it to be wishy-washy.
Where you want it to be open for discussion and decision later.
Right.
To the next planning commission, to our children who are sitting here 20 years from now.
Well, hopefully it won't take us 20 years to take that question up, but you never know.
But that's my point. Looking at those kind of words in this document, in this plan, town plan, I think is important at this stage, and make sure there are some things that we want to still consider, and there are some things we want to say, no,
right,
we want that to happen now.
Right.
And
I don't think I need an attorney
with
for
that
that.
point of well, maybe not, but we need to consider that question.
In fact, the attorney can't help us with that. That's our decision, right?
Yes, it is. All the attorney would be able to do would say, you said these things are for the future decisions, these things you're saying very specifically should happen now with this town plan. Maybe that is something that you and I and the rest of us look at and decide on ourselves. We are the deciders in this case. I understand that, but to not have that in mind and simply put our town plan before the town to judge whether they want it or not, I think
This
that's
board
part
is
of our
ultimately
responsibility.
responsible for the content,
Yeah,
right? If you're looking for a lawyer to put legalese on it, I don't think that's the way to go.
I'm looking for this board to look at those questions and make sure when we say consider, we mean that, and when we say shall, we mean that. And I haven't heard, since I've been on the planning commission, I haven't heard an emphasis to make sure that we're clear among ourselves.
I mean, we talk
shalls
about wording
and
all
the
the time,
considers.
especially when restructuring bylaws. We talk about this all the time.
Okay.
I think that it was definitely in mind whether to use shall versus should or whatever, but I'm not sure that all of you had it in the front of your minds as opposed to just the content of what the sentence said versus how it was being said. So
Well,
my only fear in this, John, is that regardless of whether an attorney or the planning commission takes a look at this, there are 199 action items and a lot of text to go with them.
I
If,
am
n-
aware
if,
of that.
if you 9 members go through, look at all those, and you all come to different conclusions about which ones should be shalls and which ones should be should, well, I guess we should know that, but it could definitely delay, the delivery of this
Not
to the
delay, it
select
would
board.
take longer.
Well,
I don't consider
Well,
it a
the same,
delay.
that's the same thing.
Because
Not to be impatient, but meanwhile, time is ticking, and we still don't have a town plan because we need to go through all these comments.
Yeah,
Um,
but when we say this is the town plan, then like, we're done with that. So
You're never
I
done with
don't
your town
think-
plan.
I don't think we're obligated to meet a particular schedule if we don't feel our work is not done.
We are not against a deadline, that is true.
I mean, there's not something
Yeah.
that someone's gonna penalize the town, or penalize us, or remove us from our position, or take our
Of course
authority
not,
away
but
or
it prevents
anything.
us from moving
So-
on to things that we do need to be working on.
But we do need to work on this and make sure this is what we wanna put out. That's what we're doing now, we're working on the town plan. Yes, we've got other stuff that we have to get to, but we have to know that we have completed our work to the best of our abilities on the town plan. Like I said, I
Well-
wasn't here through all of these discussions, all the many, many times that you talked about the shalls and the wills and the considers and so forth. I'm just saying, let's make sure now, as we're completing the town plan, that we're all okay with the shalls and the wills and the considers.
Well, how do you think a lawyer would have changed the outcome of the Hannaford? What do you think?
Let's not go there. This
No,
board does not deal with specific cases.
That one's still being litigated too, so.
I have heard many times from your DRB that they have not got clear enough language to make an evaluation of a proposal from a developer. I've heard that many times from people on the DRB. I want to give them the clearest language we can, to help them make their decisions, so that it's not vague when it gets to them.
I don't know how a lawyer would help that, but
Well, I don't think we need to keep going around on this. My emphasis is that we all just have in mind, is this a should, is this a possibility? Is that the language we want in the town plan? And it isn't the rule, that's the zoning bylaws, the subdivision regulations, that's the rule that says you shall do this. But
Those are
this
bylaws.
backs it up,
That gives us the power to set the bylaws.
right?
In a few instances, it is used by the PSB, right? But
It's not just the Public Service Board, the Environmental Court also.
it's
comes back to
it's a guiding principles document, right? It's an empowerment document. Right? I don't want to be committed to every one of those almost 200, recommendations, because I know realistically a lot of those aren't going to get done in 10 years. We're going to have to pick the first set and do them, and then pick the second set, just like we've always done.
Whether you say shall or whether you say maybe, it's a commitment. It's a commitment either way.
It's a
And I just want
prioritization.
us to,
I'm done
be sure on
arguing
that.
this, right?
that's all.
All right. I think if Alex went off, I gotta agree with Alex. If Alex went off, right, and he did a survey of what other towns do, most other towns are not gonna hire an attorney to look at their town plan.
They might do it for their regulation revisions, which we
They
haven't
might.
been doing either, and that, so
They might.
that
I
might be a
think-
practice we
I
wanna
think
start
that
budgeting
comes
for.
long before the town plan.
Was there anything else from the public hearing besides Jamie Carroll's comment that we just talked about, that you thought was substantive versus like obvious, like just go do that, Alex? because if there is, talk about it, otherwise maybe we could move on to the written, stuff, especially what came in tonight, because Andrea's comments are pretty, as usual, pretty substantive.
Yep.
There was a question by a fellow that has property on Lake Iroquois about the shoreline.
Jamie Carroll?
Right, and he asked, our town plan suggests no more subdivision, no more lots get created, but his question was, what about the camps that are on small properties? If two camp lots are combined, is that a problem? Do we want to prevent that from happening? I don't know that we addressed that, but that was his question. as
Yeah,
heard
I recall his question, and I think,
It's
I
in
think it's a
Dawn's notes.
highly specific situation that's not appropriate for the town plan. You know, I think that's something that there's guidance in the plan about not wanting to see a whole lot more new development around the lake. And the way you implement that is through a regulatory process. And we have that now. Our regulations deal with
Yeah.
when lots are merged, when they come into common ownership. And if we wanted to change that, I think we're empowered to do that now under the current town plan. So it would just be a function of whether you wanted to touch on that when we hit the regulations. I don't know that you want to drill down to that level of detail.
Well, I mean, you didn't say what you just said at the hearing, which might have, made him more comfortable.
Yeah,
The fact that
my role at that hearing was
would
just
be
to help
allowed.
answer questions and hear people. I don't want to talk them down, but now that you're talking about what to do with things, I think you got to put it in context.
Yeah, I mean, it's already in zoning bylaw.
Jamie's a smart guy. We need to actually get him on this commission or on the DRB.
Plus, he already knows it's allowed because we did it right on the street.
Well, I think he was.
Right?
He was looking at what our written documents are.
No, he was saying he likes the fact that we're discouraging more development around the lake.
Yeah, he
And-
supported that.
He was basically saying, is there some way that when two lots come into common ownership, you can force them to merge and maybe force one of those structures to come down as the other one gets improved? He was basically looking for more ways to restrict development.
Well, he also made the reference, instead of having two small summer camps, what about having a single residence there that's a
Mhm.
year-round residence?
Yep.
Wouldn't that be possible, was what I heard him asking. There was a question, and this was in one of the written responses that you received, about who's responsible for what actions and approvals. Is there some kind of a chart, a diagram of how decisions get made so that the public knows who to go and talk to
That
about
came up at the
resolving?
public hearing. Didn't
That came
Mary
up-
Beth bring
That
that
came
up?
up at the public
She wanted a
hearing.
flow chart of town
yeah.
government.
Right, and then
who
you made
does
a
what.
reference to, or that woman made a reference to it in her written comments
My,
that you published as
my
well.
my 2 cents on that. Set number one is, it's a great idea. Here's who you go to for what.
Right,
My second cent is,
It's
It's
not
a-
our,
it's a really bad thing to put in a town plan, because very few people are gonna go into a 200-page document in order to find this. It's a great thing to have is, one easy link on a website.
I went to a workshop where there was a town, I think it might have been Bethel, I can't remember which, where they came up with a document, Bethel, a user's guide, and that they handed out to people,
Yeah.
Greenery
to all new residents. That did
Okay.
just that, and talked about, services available and who to go to for what type of issue. And it would be a fantastic project.
I'm not suggesting it's something we put in the town plan. I am asking, do we as a planning commission request that the town consider doing this and creating a project outside of our responsibility to
I
prepare
have-
something? Maybe it's
you know,
a staff job.
I have no problem, if you wanna put a bullet in a town governance or something like that, consider,
Yeah, that could go
consider,
on the
Some
town
kind of a
plan.
consider
diagram
creating
showing
Yeah,
decisions
consider
are
creating
made.
a user's guide for new resident, or for residents of Hinesburg.
Just like our matrix that says who's responsible for doing this, well, it doesn't say planning commission under that one. It says staff or select board or whatever.
Yeah, that's not a PC.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. I'll add that in the general government
Yeah.
section, you know, a bullet saying, create a flow chart to help citizens understand who in town government is responsible for what and where you go. I will tell you that we are a small community. We are not South Burlington. All it takes is a phone call.
Yep.
Anybody who calls the office and talks to me is gonna get a real answer about who they should talk to about whatever they need to talk
Maybe
about.
that's all we need to say then.
It's very short flow chart.
Yeah. Call the town office. Missy fields those calls. Missy and Cheryl in the town clerk's office field those calls all day long about things you wouldn't even realize people would call this office about. Where do I get rid of my tires? How do I deal with a
Oh, yeah.
bad possum in my road? What do, you know, when's the dump open? You know, all those kinds of things.
So maybe on Front Porch Forum, somebody, you or somebody on the staff simply says, if you've got questions about almost anything, call the town
Yeah.
offices, town clerk or the planning office.
I'll do that, John. That's
And
'cause
answer the question.
I wasn't entirely sure if that question was genuine, to be perfectly honest, or if it was a question that included a little bit of angst about not having gotten the answers they wanted and feeling like they got the runaround from certain staff members. So
Sounded like they were meeting a brick wall in trying to get an answer to something.
Gotcha.
Sounded like they were being shuffled around and so forth, to me.
anything else from the public hearing that was substantive you want to talk about before I just make all those changes?
There was the question about, and this was also in a written response that you sent to all of us, about the official map. Is there going to be an update of the official
Right.
map?
Right.
We're not working on that now, I understand that.
No, but I
Just
promised
that question
Christine
came up.
Jacobs that somewhere in the document, we should recognize that the official map that is part of the town plan for reference is out of date, and certain elements of it need to be updated. I'm not sure. I gotta figure out where to do that. If you are okay with that, it'll probably end up in that general government section of the
That's where I put
chapter.
it.
That's fine.
And I'm not sure that I wanna change the map itself, because it does have that regulatory piece to it, so maybe just adding a note to the map itself that says, you know, this is incorporated in the town plan by reference, it needs to be updated, you know, something like, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Well, are you saying that we're not actually ever going to go back and look at the official map as
No,
part
we-
of our work?
We have to
Yeah.
get done the town plan first,
Right,
and then
right, that's what I thought, we
Yeah,
were
yeah.
gonna get to that.
It's a
Right,
PC
but I
shop.
don't wanna,
So that doesn't put that off.
I don't wanna update the official map as a part of our town plan update, because it's actually a
Yeah.
regulatory document like zoning.
Yeah, no, we need to look at that separately. There was a comment having to do with the energy committee's, apparently their desire to be net zero energy by 2030.
Oh, that was a substantive
And-
comment, yeah.
And the question was, do you know how much that increases the cost of a building if that is the standard that we have to meet? Laura Carl Smith suggested that they spent 20% more doing a zero net house recently. And shouldn't there be some way that the town helps out getting people to do that? Maybe there's some kind of a tax rebate, maybe there's some other kinds of benefits that come to someone when they do a net zero building. And I don't know whether, again, that comes into our energy section or not.
Well, what did you all
Whether or
think
not
about that? I mean,
Yeah, he
clearly
was-
the
he-
energy
I mean, that was a
committee.
legit-
Yeah,
that
Rob,
seemed to be
Rob
a
was playing around with
legitimate-
different ideas and suggested financial incentives. I think it would take some hashing out with the energy committee about how to do that.
What to do about
Um,
that, if we're gonna do anything about that, we the town.
The federal
Okay,
government
okay.
gives incentives, don't they?
You what?
Tax credit, sure, for energy efficiency and implementation, yeah. Yeah, there are, through Efficiency Vermont, there are ways that you recoup some of the costs for doing higher efficiency units. My impression was that the Energy Committee felt that this net zero goal was not something we were creating, but was rather something in the statewide comprehensive
Right.
energy plan. So
Right.
it was going to happen, so we should just talk about it. I don't know if Rob Bast and Laura Carl Smith understood that, or if they thought Hinesburg was, through this plan, was trying to achieve something greater than what is being talked about statewide.
I got the impression that they understood that it was a state requirement, that all towns were asked to do this. But that's a hardship, they were saying.
Yeah.
That's an expense, that's an added expense. Is there something the town could do to help reduce that hardship? I thought that's what the direction of their question was about. And maybe at this point, it's just listing out the sources that are available and going to the Energy Committee and say, can you give us a shopping list so that people know here are places that you can get rebates, you can get restitution for the added cost, but it's not our regulation, it's the state
Well,
regulation.
but at the same time, the state, that's a goal at the state level. It's not a regulation. They would like Vermont to be at
Right,
that by
right.
2030. So by putting such strong language in our town plan, because it is strong language, it's not wishy-washy. The Energy Committee made sure to use very strong language. I think you need to understand that language is staking a claim, in Hinesburg, that these statewide goals are our goals, and that we expect, we do expect them to be adhered to. Even
What
though this
happens
is not a
when-
regulatory document, it's certainly worded in a strong fashion.
So when we get to looking at the next level of regulations, in other words, the zoning regulations, the subdivision regulations, are we obligated to put strong language about if you come in with a proposal to develop a cluster of 5 houses, we require that you show that they are going to be maybe not zero net energy, but at a
Right. No,
higher level of energy conservation.
Zoning changes
than-
have to be consistent with and help implement the town plan. There isn't a direct one-to-one language relationship. There's wiggle room in there, but I think that having such strong language in the plan would influence, those regulations.
Our future discussions about
Sure.
how do we word the zoning regulations
Yeah.
in response to this strong language from
Well, and I
Energy
don't think
Committee.
Rob and Laura are the only people that are gonna have an adverse reaction to the language that the
Right.
Energy Committee put in there. I know of
Right.
one select board member who, that was the first thing he saw when he read the document was,
And
wow, how is that actually gonna happen?
Right,
It's
and
not
I'm sure
happening
there are
today.
I'm sure there are gonna be other people who
Yeah.
say exactly the same thing.
Just so you all understand, from a municipal perspective, we don't have the ability to give tax credits. We don't raise
Oh,
enough
yeah,
revenue.
right.
Property taxes are used for things that we can't just give them up. We can't stop plowing a road because we want people, we want to give people money off on their energy efficient home. But what we have done is we've adopted this PACE district, which is not implemented yet. It's been hung up in the red tape that is government bureaucracy. But the PACE district, once it's implemented, is something the town does that makes a different sort of borrowing available to people who want to do energy efficiency improvements, whether it's an audit or blowing an insulation or building a home that's closer to net zero. So we are at least on the road to making one other funding source possible, although we haven't completed that yet. I don't see us being able to do much more in the way of like, well, the federal government gives you $2,000 back when you install energy efficient appliances,
No,
and the
we're
town
not-
gives you another
town-
$200 on top
No,
of that. I don't
town's
see
not-
that happening.
Town's not, no, I'm not expecting or suggesting we do that. Simply that we recognize that's gonna be a question that's gonna come back to
So
number
would you
of
like me
times.
to just get the energy committee to chew on that a little bit, knowing that this is likely gonna be an issue at the
It seemed
select
to
board
be
level?
it seemed to be the hot button
Yeah.
issue in terms
What
of the
gives you
energy.
guys the specific language in here that is this,
That is
Aggressive,
causing the reaction?
yeah?
Here, let's look at it real quick.
I mean, I've looked through it and maybe I missed it. There's some,
It's in chapter 8.
yeah,
Page 98, right here. And it's based on what the state's, not requirements, but the state's intentions are under residential,
okay.
all
Yeah.
of this stuff right there. My notes that I wrote that evening was, should the town have a role in meeting this goal? Can individuals be included in benefits from large-scale projects?
You know, it's interesting because when I look at the action items for chapter 8, you know, at the beginning,
We don't have anything.
We
there's
don't
there's
have that.
there's a lot of
Right.
encourage, promote. It's all very permissive, required language. I think what people are reacting to is what John pointed out, which is in the text, not in the narrative itself. So maybe there's a way to talk to the energy committee about, like, look at the action items and how they're worded versus the somewhat more strongly worded narrative. Is there a way you can blend those, or
Well, there's a mitigating word. It in the first paragraph in the right side column 98, it says at net zero 2030 the following are recommended. That's a soft word.
that's true.
Right, that is a soft word. It never says that this is a recommendation that comes from the state of Vermont.
But it's
And
funny because it says the following are recommended, and then the first bullet says all new homes built will be required to be
Right.
net zero by the year 2030.
Right,
So it's like these are recommendations, but if you're
But
going to
you-
do these recommendations,
you will,
they're going to be thou shalt.
Well, the recommendation is that all new homes built, in that time period are this.
But you
That's
know,
the way
with
I
the,
interpret. But
the way the code is going, I mean, it's, by 2030, we'll be close to that anyway with the, I mean, what is it, every 3 to 5 years, they
I
keep.
think it's every 3 years they're going to update the residential building energy standard.
Right,
And yeah, that's what the energy committee's been telling us, is that they understand the state's intent is to change those minimum building standards such that by
So
2030 you're
Arby's
getting
could be right up there,
you're getting
so,
close to net zero.
yeah.
Well, so do you want to change some of this language? Do you have an idea on
There's-
how to address this? Do you want me to
there's
bring this to the
nothing
energy
in here
committee?
that says this is coming from the state. Why don't we say that? Because that's where it's coming from.
why?
We didn't
Well,
create all of
I'm
this.
not sure that the state whether they're regulations or whether they're
Their goals.
aggressive goals,
They are the
is
latter.
quite as
Their goals.
specific as these 4 bullet points, or maybe there are more.
These came from the Energy Committee, right?
Yes.
I don't think there's anything here that requires something to happen. So I don't know what the specificity or the blame is required here.
I see what you're saying. You're thinking the angst that is being felt by, for example, Rob and Laura at the meeting, and this one select board member that I've talked to, could be assuaged by reminding them that these are just recommendations.
Well,
I don't
in line
understand.
with that, then maybe the first bullet, if that's the case, I'm not sure I agree, but all new homes built will be required. That's pretty specific.
Yes, but
It's
it's
not an action item.
it's a bullet point under the above paragraph, which is recommended.
Yeah. Well, we ought to be consistent, I guess.
Yeah, maybe it should just say all new homes built should be.
Are
Net zero.
recommended to be net zero, if in fact recommended is the word that governs.
Rather than will be.
Yeah.
Well, see, if that's the
Well-
only change, if that change you think will be more consistent with the language before it and the action items, you're empowered to make that change, and I don't have to go talk to the
I mean,
energy committee.
certainly if I look down through the other bullet points here,
They're
there's
softer.
there's a
Encourage,
preponderance of
right.
should.
They're
and-
all
Right.
softer. They're
Right.
all
Right.
much softer, yeah.
I'll also tell you, we do a fair number of net zero energy houses, some I've done with Chuck Reese. I would dispute the 20% number,
I would too. but
and by the
I
year
didn't
two
wanna get
thousand
into
thirty, we are going to be doing nothing but net zero energy houses. In fact, virtually all residential units, especially new ones, the challenge is really the existing ones.
Right, what do we do with the stock
So
that's out
I,
there?
I don't view it as a particularly onerous burden.
So you want me to change the language in that first bullet or not then, Rolf?
Well-
You're confusing me.
Yeah, well, I'm just sort of trying to get a little bit of a fact out there, I guess.
Well, you know.
But if recommended is what governs all of these bullet points, then I would say all new homes built are recommended to be
recommended
net
to
zero
be-
energy by the year 2030.
Okay, I'll make that change.
Or leave it and let the select board deal with it.
Don't do
No.
that. We know it's an issue. It came up at the public hearing from a non-select board member, although he was a former one, so.
Energy has come up in the past.
Yeah.
And we fight about RBs versus Energy Star versus nothing versus.
All right, I got it. That's an easy change to make.
The only other thing, and this didn't come up in terms of a complaint, but Rob pointed out that this photo, this one particular photo, he had installed that
Mhm.
louver, and yet it seemed to be sort of the main thing about this photo.
I think he was confused about why that photo was there. Those are not pictures of just historic buildings. They're pictures of some historic buildings and buildings that provide architectural elements that present what Hinesburg is, you know. So if that's an inappropriate picture from an architect standpoint, then I'm happy to take it out. But it wasn't meant to, you
It's
know,
not inappropriate.
I
be
don't
a
think it's
false.
inappropriate, I just think there's a host of photographs that the Historical Society has that
I
you
look
could
through all of
draw
them.
on.
I look through all of them.
and
Do you have others you want in
put
there?
it-
You tell me
and
what you want.
Put
and I'll put
something,
them.
put something there.
You want an older
I
version of
mean,
that same
there
thing?
there is a very nice map of Hinesburg from, 1830 or something like that, that
Mhm.
shows the structures that are still existing today
Mhm.
when they were built. I think that map might be a little more evocative of cultural resources. That's showing what was in the past, what our town was, so.
Well, that
Well, I
is
don't know, right
an
there
old
with the-
building, just so we're clear. Rob just indicated he did the event on
He
it.
did the event,
Right.
right.
It's
Yeah,
still
the
a historic building.
Right, it's,
So I
it is a
like the fact
historic
that you
building.
have close-ups along with, because right next to it, we've got 2 historic photos and then a contemporary photo of a historic house. I think the close-ups are nice, next to the, I mean, there's plenty of blank space if you wanna throw in additional.
I will grant it's a little confusing because that's the chapter, that's the orphan chapter that none of us feel like is really well done, and it turns out to be a chapter just about historic buildings.
I
And
don't.
anyway,
I
I'll look
view-
for that map,
What-
John. Maybe you can help me find it.
I've got it on my computer, I can send it to you.
That would be helpful.
In terms of that cultural chapter, it seems to me there is a lot of culture that we don't recognize in all of the organizations and all of the events that have been created in this town
Yeah.
by citizens, not by an appointed planning commission with rules and regulations, not by the voted select board, but by people who just wanted to do cool things.
Yeah. I think that would be a great addition to this
There
chapter.
could be some
Yeah.
language about all these things
Uh-huh.
over the years that
Right,
have
so
happened.
we talked about that when we talked about this chapter, and my appeal was, I can't do it, somebody needs to take this on, maybe.
What about the
Maybe
historic-
somebody
what
outside
about
of the
the
commission
historical-
could write up a little
I mean, you've
chapter.
gotten input from,
Catherine Goldsmith made comments that were indicative of maybe this chapter being bolstered, but somebody reach out to her, please, or someone else, because
Okay.
I'm not rewriting this chapter, I'm trying to get you to the
No.
finish line,
No,
so.
we've had this.
no,
conversation before.
and I don't think it's you don't have the background and, the knowledge about all of those things.
Right.
Someone would need to put that together other than you.
So maybe that concludes the public hearing portion of your comments. You want to talk about some of these hard-hitting written recommendations?
Would it make sense to go through Andrea's and Conservation Commission at the same time, because they both seem to be in order of,
However you want, Maggie. Those are just the most recent ones that came in. You haven't talked about the ones that you received in
Yeah,
advance.
I'd
of
like
the
to go
hearing, and
first
there's-
in, first out.
okay, let's do that.
Say again, Joe?
First in, first out.
In other words, hit the ones that that were submitted to you some time ago.
Yes. So I'm looking under the folder that was labeled
Public comment.
public comments, just to go through those one by one. So I think the first one was Rob Bast and roundabouts. Certainly I have no problems, right, saying something about roundabouts in the transportation section.
Or at least,
What do you want to say exactly? That they're good?
I
or
think that
I heart
what
roundabouts.
what Rob
I'll use
said.
emoticons. How's that sound?
What Rob said was that the town should be receptive to intersection design improvements, which sort of, includes roundabouts.
Yep.
So that sounds maybe like an action item? The town, just what you read, and then in parentheses, for example, roundabouts?
Well,
We've actually done that twice, I think. It hasn't gone anywhere.
I mean, that's kind of like saying the town should be receptive to improving roads and the way they're striped. I mean, it's like, of course we are. Of course we are. It's like in any particular intersection, you either support or don't support a roundabout option. But you tell me what you want to put in there, because I love roundabouts. I think Rob's right, but I'm just not sure exactly where to put it or how you want it worded. I'm happy to put it as an action item, just what you read, Maggie. The town should be receptive to, what was it?
Wasn't that something Rob
intersection
put in his- Yeah.
design improvements, including roundabouts.
Okay, I can put that in.
Rob will be happy if you include the word roundabouts. He's talked about that for quite a number of years.
He's right, they're really good.
Yeah.
Well,
they're
and
good
Silver
things.
Street, oh my God.
All right, the next one in the list was from Jacqueline Bissonette. I don't know how to go about this one. I think there's multiple ideas here.
Well, one is a dig, and then the other
Well,
is
yeah,
an
I mean,
actual
the-
suggestion,
the-
right?
the-
To
the
get
dig-
pickleball.
The dig I disagree with. Personally, I think we wanted buildings up close to the street for, calming methods and more of a village-scape a la Bristol, all right, so I think there were some reasons for that. I think the bigger one is the recreation. I don't know. I mean, this is survey one. I don't know whether pickleball is. I don't even know what pickleball is. Right? I don't know whether pickleball is the big upcoming thing or whether
Kind
it's
of,
it's one
paddle
person.
board
Right.
kind of
Um,
thing that you play on a tennis court.
I mean,
I think making some comment about, in the town plan, I'm not sure where it belongs, but, getting into specific activities doesn't seem to be something that we should be in the business of doing, but to suggest that, the town plan somehow, addresses the, physical health of our citizens is, seems to me to be appropriate.
But we do that, so
We
that's
do
what
that.
I'm trying
Right,
to get
so if
to.
done,
Already
then we're done.
that.
I mean,
th-
well,
I-
yeah. I mean,
think
if you
we
wanted to
did.
get any more specific, I was thinking of something like, explore the recreational needs, not only for, adolescents and teenagers, but adult and senior populations, and
Across
address
all
those as
ages.
part of
Yeah.
our, recreation infrastructure plan.
Right, and that's why I think we do say that, but maybe we don't say it specifically enough, or as specifically as Jacqueline would like us to. I'm looking at, chapter 6 in the plan,
6.3 or, no,
page 71.
She was talking about a running track.
Yeah, she
like
mentioned
like
two
you might
things.
find at a high school
Running track
facility.
and pickleball courts.
Right.
But I think Joe's right. Her basic message is those are examples of things that we should be thinking about as our aging population continues to age, and we need to plan rec facilities for them.
so 6.3.8 has keep recreational offerings and facilities at pace with growth in population and the aging demographic.
Well, 625, I mean,
Yeah, that's the one I was looking
to
at.
serve all ages in the community, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe we could bolster that though, to
Children's
say
arts,
all
sports.
ages in the community with special attention to the
Pickleball
growing
players.
senior population.
I mean, 6.3.3 too, conduct a study of current and future recreational needs, identify locations of parks, fields, and other facilities. Right, and
Our official map already has lots of trails and
I think in a general,
walking areas that, I mean,
Well,
that's a good place to do running, for example.
to be responsive to Jacqueline's suggestion, are you amenable to me adding to 625, with special, at the end of it, with special attention to the growing senior population?
sure.
It says to serve all ages, but
Right. But there's one age group that we're gonna pay maybe special attention to, because we know that they're coming on strong. And she's not
There's no
wrong,
harm
a
in
lot of the
doing-
rec
no.
programs that we provide are geared towards youth, it's
Mhm.
just the way the rec stuff is. Okay. Did you want me to tack something like that onto
No, that's fine.
633 as well, or no?
I think, I think if you tack something on, I mean, 633 talks about a study. You could say paying particular attention to high density residential areas and changing demographics.
Okay. Great.
Okay, so we have 2 comments by Lenore. So the first one I think is pretty general, and the second one is a lot more specific. First one says the list is coming.
Right.
Right. All right. And then the second one is really substantial. I was trying to look at this before, and it's at least 3 pages of very specific changes.
Oh, the ones from, right, she had a comment
Yeah.
on October 27th saying, I'm gonna give you some map changes, and then
Right.
she had the comments from November 12th.
This is 11/12.
Yeah.
So I think this first one is, I mean, certainly we're into protecting wetlands. But page 7 is top priority actions.
So for everyone, so everyone's on the same page, we're looking at Lenore's first comment on her November 12th document. She's commenting on page 7, bullet 6.
Which I really,
6. I'm not sure.
if I read the bullet, if I count them right,
Yeah, I'm not
Oh,
sure.
was she looking at this version though, I wonder? Probably. We
I
didn't
believe
have-
so,
we-
yeah.
we hadn't pulled out goals. in
Yeah, I don't see how bullet 6 relates to wetlands at all, so
yeah.
might have to ask her. Want me to just put a question mark and ask her
Yeah,
about that?
put a question mark there.
She's available even if she's not in the office. She should be back in the office shortly. So the next one was page 14. I think maybe, I don't know what exactly she was.
I think this is just talking about border compatibility. Right, and I'm wondering, I mean, it seems that her comment would not go here.
I think Maggie, you may have caught something here. I think her page numbering is, oh no.
Based on
No,
another
it's,
No,
version.
it
the
does.
page numbering is right.
It is
I
right
think
for
the
Shaw.
earlier versions of the plan, we hadn't called out the goals and the priority goals, so this must be the version that she's
Is this
referring
Lenore
to.
we're talking
Yes,
about?
Yeah.
Lenore's November 12th comments.
November 12th?
Yes.
Yeah, for some reason it says, when I click on it, it says, can't be previewed.
All right, so I guess I can kind of see this. You know, the bottom of the paragraph on Charlotte, it says, furthermore, two communities frequently work together on conservation watershed projects. So, if you wanted to add to that paragraph, I guess I could see that there.
So,
I don't know that it's really
Yeah, I'm not sure that
substantive.
that's necessary there.
okay, well, no change then.
Yeah.
Got it. Page 21. She had a verbiage suggestion. 2.1.6. This seems very nitpicky to me. but-
I'm happy with the way it is. I mean, the second part of this says how you're gonna do the first part of it.
Yeah, that's how it was meant to be read.
Yeah.
Okay, so no change there.
All right. I read 2.4, so the second one, page 21, 2.4.3. I read 2.4.3 and 3.1.2 multiple times, and I don't think they're incompatible.
You know, it's funny because Andrea made the same comment.
Yeah,
I
she
noticed-
did.
I noticed that, but-
You know what they're misconstruing? Encouraging there to be maximum development of projects in the village area says nothing about how quickly those developments will
Right.
come online and the village will be developed. It just means when there is a project, we're encouraging it to be a full build out of the property, not a 25% solution. Whereas the other action item says, take your time, figure out your pacing. You can still build projects to their maximum build out and still pace how quickly everything gets built out or how quickly those projects come online. I think that's the confusion.
And that's what I saw the differentiation as and why I decided that they weren't in conflict with each other.
But is there a way we could reword one of them? To
Yeah, I
make
wonder if
make
people
it
are
so
are
people
con-
don't stumble over that? Because
Right.
Andrea clearly stumbled over it the same way Lenore did. Unless maybe they're talking to each other. I don't know. We could change 2.4.3 to say encourage the maximum development of projects in the village growth area with consideration of proper phasing, infrastructure, timing related to infrastructure needs. I don't know, something like that.
Did Andrea have something?
Yeah, she
Some
had
language
she had a
on that
similar.
one?
Sensitivity to.
She basically said the same thing, that these two action items contradict each other.
Sensitivity to phasing and infrastructure limits? Does
Add that to 2.4.3.
What do you
Encourage
think?
the maximum development of projects in the village growth area with sensitivity to
Phasing and
pace of
infrastructure,
build out or phasing and infrastructure.
infrastructure limits. I don't know.
What do you
Just
think
tossing.
with that?
That sounds good.
Does that sound good to you, Dennis?
It might clear up some of the.
I really don't get her comment about 2.4.3. Let's not allow for gradual growth and not allow?
think she meant to say, let's allow for gradual growth and possible
That would
demographic
make more
changes.
sense, but it reads, what she wrote was
Yeah,
let's
I
not
don't think she
allow.
meant to insert not.
Yeah,
Well, so at least a few of you, or me, I don't feel like there's a contradiction between these goals. The question is, if that's
we
the
need-
case,
do we
should
need to
we,
add-
should we add
Expand
some,
anything.
some additional text to hopefully make it clear to everyone else that there is no conflict? So Maggie had a suggestion to tack on some qualifying language to the end of 243.
Which I liked.
yeah, I did too. Which was the one that was in conflict, which people thought was
Yeah,
two,
Lenore
2-1.
called out 243 and 312
312.
as
Oh,
contradictory.
contradictory, okay.
With
In the next
sensitivity
chapter,
to
yeah.
phasing and infrastructure needs, yes?
Yeah, or infrastructure needs or limits.
The sky's the limit, Maggie. Where'd those cookies go anyways?
Over here. Wait,
Dennis
There-
ate 'em.
I don't want Dennis to hurt himself by lifting this heavy thing over there.
Thanks, John.
You don't want the whole thing?
No, just one cookie's fine.
Don, do you want one?
What was the village area one, 312?
312.
Right, which we did have as a top priority.
Okay. Is her next one just a stylistic thing?
I
Page
think so.
32? You want me to make the change she suggested? For those of you that are already there?
Well, it also has a likely there, temporary issue that will likely be addressed. Temporary issue that, so she wants to make it more firm. That will be resolved as opposed to will likely be addressed.
I like the wishy-washy here. I can't see below ground. I don't know how much water there is. I don't know what it costs to bring it to production. Right, so therefore, I can't definitively say it will be resolved. I don't know where it is, I don't know how much it is, and I don't know what it
Right.
costs.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible that it won't be resolved. That we will not have additional water
Right,
supply.
Right.
Won't have this
Right.
additional water.
In this is one that, you know, if I made the promise that it will be resolved, right, I don't want somebody reading that and saying, you broke your promise. You
Yeah,
owe me
that could
this."
be particularly bad if a developer came to town, read this and said, oh, well,
Said, right,
they've got it figured
they've
out.
got
I
it figured out.
I
I
can
can
plan for a really
propose-
big
I
project.
can propose what I want, yeah.
Okay, so leave as is. Oh, her next one is a typo, and somebody else already called that out, so
Okay.
I will make that change.
I see, I see 421, 423. No,
On page 37?
yeah, I have it on, I think I have it on 39, 421 and 423. But I'm reading these.
Oh, but we're on her
37 on
we're
the
on her
right-hand
comment
side?
before that one, Joe.
Oh, I thought that was, oh, okay, there's 237s there, so I skipped
Yeah.
that.
So her question is, the current draft says that there will be limited impacts on Patrick Brook due to development in development in the village. And her question was, do we know that? Isn't it actually more, I think she's implying it, isn't gonna be like a big impact? And my answer is, Hinesburg Center Phase 2 did have a reputable firm study what the impacts would be, and they are minimal.
As required in the present bylaws.
Exactly, yeah, they did a very robust
Yeah.
hydrogeology sort of modeling, and not from just some fly-by-night firm. This was Milo and Broom that did it, the same firm that the town's been tapping for the last 10 years to help us understand this stuff.
And that was language that, I mean, that was the bar that we put in the zoning bylaws, that
Right.
analysis had to be done.
No
I think-
undue adverse impact.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
on adjoining properties due to fill and subsequent rise in floodwaters elsewhere, and
Water quality, the whole 9 yards, yep.
so I think if that's in our bylaws, that has to apply as the standard for making the statement or not.
And that's a shall. You shall do this.
Well, that's a bylaw, it says, you gotta do this,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Lenore was necessarily questioning that that development would be, that we would be sure that development would have a limited impact. It sounds more like she's saying, do we really know that it will have a limited impact? Could it not have a big impact? But I guess you're saying we wouldn't permit it if it did. Gotcha. So I will tell you that the Conservation Commission, although we haven't gotten to their comments yet, is very concerned about allowing any fill in the flood hazard area, for what it's worth. But you don't want to make a change based on what Lenore suggested then? I think the language is good.
If the study's been done, it's been brought to the DRB.
It was.
It's,
Of course, the approval for that fill has expired and this project's been denied, but that's another story.
physics is physics, science is science, it lasts,
We don't talk about projects.
stands the test of time. All right, I believe we're on 39 now.
Yeah, I don't agree on this one. It seems like providing them and the facilities is different from traffic flow. Walkways and
Yeah,
traffic.
even if she meant 422, I think 421 is different than 422 is different than 423.
Four two three is a subset of 421. But you think it's good to keep both of them, right?
You
Okay,
know, yeah.
no change. Got it.
Certainly, vehicular traffic flow in my mind is neither a facility nor a service.
So you can move on to her next comment. Page 45, 521.
So just using the imperative as opposed to.
She's not proposing any substantive change. This is just a
shall.
rephrasing. You're the linguist, Maggie. What do you think?
Well, it's using the imperative instead of the modal.
You said that word. That's why I called you the linguist. So should we be doing that?
Will you
Fancy
tell
word
me,
there.
do they have equal strength? Do they have equal weight in the document? Shall preserve. Preserve.
Anytime you can throw a shall in there, it's better. I mean, it's
All right.
more forceful.
I mean,
So I think the way it's worded now is actually, if you want it to be forceful, I would leave it.
I'm even wondering whether 521 needs to be there. We've already gone in, zoned zone the ag and forestry districts and created primary and secondary resources and directed in how to manage those. Right? And ag soils is in,
Yeah, but I remember we had some discussions about the use of the document and by the PSB and
True.
Act 250 and wanting to keep some of those basic tenets clear.
yeah, that's
That,
true.
I'm not sure that 521 survived for that reason, but I know others did, so I'm trotting it out. But Lenore didn't suggest getting rid of it, Joe. She just suggested rewording it. But you, so keep it as is?
I keep it as is.
Okay, 522, right next to it.
I mean, if
I actually agree with her on this one. I think it could be, the wording could be redone to be more active versus passive, right? Not the town should adopt, but adopt.
adopt. If that's the stronger of the two, then let's use it.
Yeah, in this case, it doesn't matter how strong it is, because it's just directing the town to do something. Whether we adopt a right to farm policy is not gonna impact how a PSB or an Act 250 board.
Fewer words is good.
Okay, I'll make the change.
So take should out.
Right, and just sort of
Yep.
reorder the wording. All right.
I,
Five, two, five, three.
so 532 is priority resource land. 533 is a much more general
Mm-hmm.
class, potentially productive ag and forest.
So for example, it's all in the agricultural section of the, goals, but Joe, are you thinking that 532 could be a justification for using the fund and maybe matching grants to go conserve a wetland area like the Carr Swamp, and 533 is really more about ag and forest conservation, not wetlands
Well,
or non-productive lands?
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I mean, what bothers me about this is, if I really read this to the letter, 532 says the town's land preservation reserve fund should work on, priority resource land, right? Whereas the town and the state and private organizations should work on, more general, potentially productive ag and forest land. And it would seem to me that, the state and, private entities would probably have more interest, right? Not that they don't have interest in general preservation, but they would probably have more interest if there was something that was really priority resource land.
Yeah, we don't define what priority resource land is, so it's a little vague.
The experience of the land trust is that by including the town's land preservation reserve fund in a small amount of funding for preservation of agricultural land or a wetland, it demonstrates the town's commitment to that, to doing that.
Right.
And on the Bissonnet project, the big project down in the south part of town, there was a couple of $1,000s out of that fund was put into that project, which was $1 million project.
Right. Yeah, I'm,
It just
Yeah.
said the town agrees, we should do this.
yeah, I
So
mean,
we're-
I would think that 532 and 533 can be combined to capture two ideas. We wanna do this with the town's land preservation fund, as well as leveraging outside resources where we can. And, you know, we want to go after a number of types of tracks. Potential ag and forestry, you know, valuable areas, other valuable areas that don't really fit under that, but are, you know, critical. Car swamp, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
I'd merge those two.
Okay, I'll do it.
And they will remain the top priority,
Right, not gonna change that.
right?
Yeah, but it just means you gotta change it in like
I'll
two
mar-
places.
I'll merge 532 into 533.
I mean, is there value though in separating the two? I mean, does it, to say these are really two separate, I mean, I don't know, in
I don't
terms
think
of
so.
clarity.
I think that if the priority resource lands makes its way into 533 in addition to ag and forest, then you've got them all in there. And this is grant application material right here. These are action
Right.
items that help us get grants.
Right.
And we can paraphrase them however we want in the grant. That's not really cheating, but a little bit. Okay. The next one Lenore had was just a question. So that's gonna be hard to answer without her here, right? But if you guys don't understand what 586 means, then
Restore
it's a
wetlands
good
and
question.
promote private partnerships to improve the wetland functions.
Well, I mean, there are known methods to restore wetlands.
Well, it's happening, or
Right?
John, isn't it happening on the La Platte headwaters?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
so-
there are definitely,
The tiles were
Techniques.
plugged and,
right, all kinds of vegetation was planted to prevent erosion.
yeah.
What does
There
those,
can be
wildlife
some, there can
even-
be some very
So-
aggressive stuff.
Yeah.
Corps of Engineers sometimes comes
They'll
in.
blow stuff
and-
up,
Right, they'll redirect stuff, they'll create a new meander and
right?
get rid of tiles and,
So everybody knows what 586 means and you
yeah,
can move on with
what,
it?
but with consideration to surrounding properties, I'm not sure with consideration to is, I'm not sure what that means.
You
Oh.
wanna flood someone's.
Yeah, that's what I thought that meant was, you wanna restore a wetland, but you don't wanna flood somebody's
Yeah.
basement in the process or make their yard unusable or,
Mhm.
So is there a way that we can be, I mean,
be
consideration
more
to,
specific about
doesn't
what
seem-
the consideration should.
while considering,
surrounding property
Effect
rights.
on,
yeah,
effect on surrounding
yeah, that's
properties.
better, while considering the effect on surrounding properties.
Okay.
That's good.
The effect on surrounding properties. Gotcha. Okay, got it. There is a change there. So. Clarified. Was that it, or did she go on to another page? Oh, she had more. Okay.
Five nine sounds like a grammatical. I got no problem with adding two. Instead of anticipate, respond, and recover, so anticipate, respond to, and recover.
Fine.
Okay.
Done.
Respond to.
Effect on four.
Okay. And now I have to flip back and forth.
If you're flipping, would you mind reading 512, so those of us who are too lazy don't have to
Okay,
flip
so
back?
if you're all looking at 510.4, I will read to you 512 when I get there.
Work with state and regional partners and road crews to create a plan for dealing with invasive species.
That seems more specific.
It's very specific.
Um,
It's the poison parsnip sentence.
yeah,
Right.
I mean, I think, I think there's value in having a more general, maybe, statement in 510.4. Maybe for grant writing purposes, you'd want something a little less specific.
I think they're,
Just throwing it out
I
there.
wouldn't recommend changing anything, I think they're
Leave
separate.
both
One
of
is,
them,
one is
yeah.
dealing specifically with roads, and the other is much more general about, invasives that
invasive
threaten the
spe-
future of
plants.
natural areas and
Right.
surface waters, and, can we leave it? Is that all
Leave
right?
it.
Yeah.
I'd like to leave it.
No change.
I think in some ways they're very different faces of the invasive problem.
So then the next one, there's, she read contradictory action items here between 512.1 and 512.2. What are ridgelines being protected from in action item 512.2?
Just right from development, I guess. Is that
Yeah,
what
it's
she
about
means?
development, right.
Okay, so develop strategies, including development review standards, in zoning and subdivision regulations to protect ridgelines and hillsides from improper development or
Inappropriate
deleterious development, inappropriate development, that sounds good.
So does that brings in wind generators as well as buildings? Solar
Yeah,
panels?
I mean,
Is that? I mean,
Potentially, but zoning regulations don't really apply to when, PSB related stuff. I think we deal with that much more in the energy chapter where we talk specifically about siting of those kinds of facilities.
They tend to end up on bridge lines.
Well, they
The-
sure do.
the
Yeah.
Wind generators do, not necessarily solar stuff.
Phil Scott's
talked
gonna take
about
care of
that a
that.
meeting or so ago with the draft from the CCRPC
Right.
that I was freaking out over.
All right, so you did page 61, you're on to 65, you're almost done with Lenore.
Okay. After schools, roads, this.
This sounds like a grammatical thing.
Sure.
Roads, first sentence.
Yeah.
Police department's getting close,
I
though.
was gonna say,
So,
Are we sure?
Yes.
so we're sure, but Maggie thinks Lenore's right that it would read better if it was her wording
It
versus.
just, it provides context, which doesn't hurt.
Okay. Reword
It's pretty subtle stuff.
per Lenore. Okay, got it.
Last sentence on 66.
so she just wants to add an example. Yes.
Or get rid of the, or used merely as trails. So sections of-
Are class 4 roads maintained at all in any fashion by the town?
No.
Well, some of them are,
Says little maintenance,
but
I
yeah,
didn't know there was any.
statutorily, we're still responsible for culverts, I think. But that's about it. Depends on the road. Weed Road, for example, is a class 4 road, and there is a
And
little
there
bit
is
of
maintenance
maintenance
by
that
the
happens. Not much. Anyway, do you want me to make this change, or is this not necessary?
I think this
It looks like she's
that's
trying to get
fine.
specific about the fact that some of these class 4 roads actually do serve an important trail function, but
I think we say that elsewhere, but it doesn't hurt. I don't see how it hurts what she's proposed.
fine.
Yeah, I think
I have
it's
a
fine.
question about roads on page 66.
all right.
Is it appropriate to mention here?
Well,
Yeah.
let me just get clarity. You all just said that Lenore's suggestion was a good change, so I will make that. Okay, go ahead, Wade.
Okay, chapter, on page 66, the second paragraph right column, the town needs to discuss whether or not some gravel roads, either in whole or sections of, are at a point where paving is a more effective option. I'm wondering if holding the roads to gravel would be a good way to keep growth down, because we've seen this in Virginia where my brother is on the town council, for example, in Middleburg, and he said they specifically know that when you pave that road, you are opening the floodgates for traffic and development. And by keeping that road gravel, you're helping to maintain the quote-unquote rural character of Hinesburg. So I just was wondering why it's worded this way. as to-
Wow.
Yeah, we even have regulations that change how many units, how many lots you can have depending on whether the road is paved or not.
It's a
Sort of.
class.
Sort of, it's more the
It's
classification
a
of the road.
class,
Right.
it's not whether it's paved or not.
The class doesn't necessarily change just
Yeah.
because it gets paved.
Yeah.
Right,
You're delving into a philosophical argument that gets argued at almost every town meeting.
Sure, but
Every
it's
March.
essential
Um,
to how we're gonna be.
Well, yeah, it generally gets pitched as is what it says here, is a cost argument, mainly on the hill roads.
Mhm.
Whether it's more cost effective to maintain a paved hill road,
And Pondbrook,
versus
Pondbrook
a-
is,
Pondbrook was a
Pond-
big argument, yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
I mean, that, and on page
Um,
28, I don't wanna,
I mean, I would say that, you know, I would agree that someone looking for a piece of property would find it more attractive to be on a paved road. However, what's really gonna limit, build out is what the zoning in that particular district allows.
well, except that I've seen this in Virginia, as soon as they paved roads, the growth expanded. Because when you give a developer a paved road, you're giving them part of their infrastructure that they need. So
Well,
it's sort of
well,
like you're greasing the skids.
But yes, but if the land on that road, right, is zoned in a fashion that says, you know, for instance, if we were to pave part of Texas Hill Road,
Mhm.
so Texas Hill Road is, so RR1, no, RR2. RR2, right? So RR2 has been zoned such that we basically maintain, and let's see, Texas Hill Road is probably like class 3 road,
Mm-hmm.
right? So class 3 road, it's like
One
a
unit per
density,
12 acres.
one per 12, right? So as long as the class of Texas Hill Road stays class 3, the density can be no more than 1 in 12. Now,
Whether
the
it's
clustering,
paved or not.
we'd encourage clustering so that you get more than, you know, you keep your houses closer and therefore you have more open land to maintain that density, right? But the only way they'd get more is if they petition, right, to create, to upgrade that to 2, which is not gonna happen.
Okay. So,
Right, because class is basically on type of service, whether it's a local connector, you know, whether it's a more arterial connector. Right, Texas Hill is always going to connect what it connects.
But maybe we could address Wade's thought or concern by just adding a little bit more to that last sentence, because you can see in that sentence it's talking about comprehensive cost-benefit analysis needs to be done to fully understand financial and environmental ramifications of paving gravel roads. Community dialogue on these issues is important. You know, ensure reflective of the greater good. We could throw in the rural character thing. I mean, that's what
It can't hurt.
that's what the Pond Brook
right,
debate was all about.
Right.
12 years ago when it happened. We all talk about it like it happened like 2 town meetings ago. It happened like 12 years ago now.
Seems like
The-
I forget about this.
I feel like these things are important, but I'll just have one other point. On page 28, you say, consider a larger cap size for grocery stores in the village, specifically the northwest zoning area. And I would urge caution on that, because keeping a box size limit keeps your development down to where you want it. If you open up that and say, well, maybe we'll have bigger store sizes, then you're opening yourselves up to exploitation.
Where do you shop, Wade?
Where do I shop?
For groceries, sure.
Lampman's.
Exclusively?
Pretty much, yes. And I'll tell you why, because I buy a lot of local things. We also buy our meat from over the hill at the farm. I mean, I live in Thistle Hill, and we can literally walk over the hill on the trail from my house, get our maple syrup, and then we also go to the farm to buy meat and vegetables from them. So I'm trying to be as local as I can.
This came up specifically because when the Hannaford supermarket, which was very controversial, was
Sure, I was
proposed,
there.
there was some indication that even if Lampman's wanted to build a larger grocery store,
Right.
that the 20,000 square foot cap might be too limiting for that particular use. Whereas limiting other retail shops or stores to 20,000 is an appropriate limit to stop big box retail from coming to town. There was discussion that maybe grocery stores are a different type of animal that, you know.
I don't buy that.
I don't buy that either.
In
Well, that's
Middleburg,
why it said consider.
There are 4 stores,
Mhm.
5 stores counting Lampman's, that are less than 20,000 square feet. They're grocery stores
All right.
in Richmond, in
Sure, that's why it said
Jericho,
consider,
in
but
Shelburne.
Got
They're
all I'm saying
all
is
less than
if you talk to
20,000
Richmond
square
about
feet,
whether
and
they-
they work.
John,
Got-
ask
gotta-
Richmond if they think that store was properly sized.
Right.
It's not. It's too small. The owner thinks it is. The community does too.
Gotta play devil's
That's not
advocate.
what I've heard.
Well,
Gotta
that's what I've
play,
heard.
gotta play devil's advocate, because this happened at 7 o'clock tonight, right? So, I'm racing around, it's pre-Thanksgiving baking, I got stuff to finish, right? I look, oh crap, I need super fine sugar. Okay, so that's great, I'll go to Lampman's just before the planning commission meeting, you know, I can get what I need, it's
They don't
nice and
have
close.
superfine.
They don't have super fine sugar.
Right, too bad.
I'm screwed.
Yeah, but
Right.
did
Too
you
bad.
choose to live here or Burlington? Because if you lived in downtown Burlington, you would be able to get the sugar probably.
Well,
That's a choice that,
It certainly is a choice. It's a choice that I made almost 30 years ago now, right? And I generally work with it. Of course, I work in Williston, so when I need stuff like that, if I really think about it, I know where I need to stop.
I just put together a pumpkin pie for tomorrow. I did not have enough cinnamon,
Right?
ginger, and one of the other spices. So I used everything I had. It's not quite enough according to the recipe. It's gonna be fine.
But the point is,
I was not driving to Burlington to get the
the
spices.
point I was trying to make. No, I'm not driving Essex tonight or wherever, right? I'm going to live with what I have, right? But the point is this, right? Size of building, right? Is, you know, what Alex alluded to, right? You get more choice, and that seems to be a little bit more of a sensitivity in grocery stores. Now, right? Again, this section, we discussed it earlier, the word is consider,
Right.
right? It empowers this board to consider it. Doesn't say we're doing it, right?
but I would suggest that you
That's why
not
I
consider
stopped
it.
making the point,
Well,
because it was considered.
Right, and the only reason it's in here, Wade, is because when we had the discussion about the Hannaford, there was a meeting at which everyone agreed we should think about this someday in the future. And if you no longer, I mean, all of you, Wade and the commission, no longer want to think about it, we can take that language right out. I'm just reacting to what happened in the past.
And I'll just give you one last example, because my brother, he schools me on this stuff, because he's on the town council for 20 years in this town. And I don't know if you've heard of Middleburg, Virginia, but it's in the hunt country in Virginia, and it's very exclusive. It's where Jacqueline Kennedy had Glenora, you know, the Kennedys had their horse riding and everything. They're trying to preserve, they're a very wealthy town, and they're trying to preserve a way of life, and they're fighting against sprawl and growth from DC. So they really have to work hard. So what they've done is they've kept their box size for stores very limited. They have a Safeway in the town, which has been there for 50 years or so. And it is limited to the size it was in 1962 or when it was put in. They don't allow a lot of gas stations. They keep a high quality, it's a walkable town, and they like it that way. But it's people with money who seem to like that. It seems to be that if you're just trying to sell your place to the lowest bidder and race to the bottom, then that's not a very good quality of life. That's my philosophical point.
And we talk about in our town plan about having a rural village, a walkable village. We talk about the quality of life all the time. Bigger than 20,000 square feet, that's not a local grocery store, that's a regional grocery store. You can't build a 38,000 square foot Hannaford style store and exist on the customers from a town the size of Hinesburg. It just won't happen.
Wegmans doesn't exist on Hinesburg customers either, John. Don't
I
fool
know,
yourself.
I know it doesn't.
Sure.
But
Right, and part of the reason this is in there, and I'm sorry to get a little testy, is some people said the reason Hannaford ended up where it ended up was because that was the only place that something bigger than 20,000 square feet could be built. If we had zoned the Village Northwest District for up to, say, a 30,000 square foot grocery store, they might have located there, and we might have not have split this community in half as a result. But because our zoning was so restrictive with that, and because we didn't anticipate that grocery stores would ever need to be bigger than 20,000 square feet, we split the community in half over Hannaford being in a commercial district, you know what I mean? And so that
But
was
there
where
hasn't
the
been-
consideration was,
The
came from.
38,000 square foot, this is old history, but the 38,000 square foot Hannaford that was proposed here was the smallest version that they have.
I
They
understand.
have four.
It's
Now,
in the,
all
it's
of
in,
the
it's in the
other
courts.
big grocery
It's not
stores-
before this board.
No, but all the other big
Right.
grocery
And-
stores
and I-
that were
you know,
already in
I-
existence 7 years
I
ago
do not
were
want
bigger
to
than
bring
20,000.
litigation that some of us are involved in into this board. It's not the place.
Since we're on page 28, if you read goal 3.3, can we make one word change? Instead of the last sentence reading, market forces shall not trump the community's desire for measured, well-planned development. Can we change that to override rather than trump?
Which one is that again, John? What's the action item?
3.2,
3
last sentence, it's all in green.
Oh, right, the goal. Everybody good with that?
Can we just take out trump and write override instead?
I'm good with that.
Certainly means the same thing.
Means the same thing, right?
Everybody, okay, I made the change. So, Wade is the only person here tonight. It's nice that he came and spoke. Would you like to make some changes based on his suggestions? I think I had suggested that in the first one about paved roads, we could add consideration of rural character into
I think-
that
fine.
paragraph.
I think that's a
That's
good
fine.
idea.
I
How
think
about,
that's fine.
how about Wade's other suggestion though about reconsidering this whole consideration of grocery
Leave
stores?
it consider.
I appreciate Wade's perspective on this. I also summon the ghost of Kyle Bostwick that says, always keep your options open because you never know what you don't know. All right?
Leave something for the future to decide.
Okay, so I'm not changing anything on that then, but I am changing the other one. I can find it
Yeah.
again.
I would just amend that though to say that once you've developed the land, you can't go back.
Right.
So that's, I understand your point, but I'm just saying there are role models for towns that do this, and they're very effective. They keep the cap size down and they keep the crap out.
Yeah. Again, the cap size is today what the cap size is today. It's nowhere near this. The word is consider, right? It's not anything this board, and it would have to come through this board, right? Anticipates within, a 5-year time frame. Right, and there would be a heck of a community discussion if we ever thought about it and discussed it again.
That's for sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
I agree with that.
I think Joe's superfine sugar is gonna be delivered by a drone. And,
Soon. That's coming.
any grocery store of, the kind of size we've been familiar with is likely in demise.
It won't be needed.
It's exhausting going up and down those aisles.
Mm-hmm. And it chews up so much time.
But then you run into people and talk about community stuff.
Don't you have neighbors you can call?
Oh, yeah, all
That's
my
always
neighbors
the
stock superfine.
You mean powdered?
No, I mean superfine. It's not, superfine is not powdered.
Thanks for letting me
It
say
is
my
distressing
piece.
though, John, to
Not
hear your
confectioner.
culinary,
It's not
No.
confectioners.
culinary downgrades happening, you know. It's distressing.
Okay, so Lenore's last comment is just a typo, and it was
Yeah,
it was a real thing. So I'll make that
It's a real
correction.
typo.
It's a real typo. So you just finished Lenore Budd
Hey.
with the understanding that her map 13
Still
changes.
is to come.
Yeah, and I'm happy to. I told her I'm happy to work with that, and she's chairs trails committee. That's really their map. So I'll just talk to her and make those changes. She didn't say they were substantive, most sort of visual. That's how she described it to me. She's like, it's really hard to read this map. Can't we make it more readable?
It's this funny little.
Well, there's too much on
A
it.
whole bunch of circles to
Yeah,
show
that's
connection.
that's readable. It's all the other stuff that
No.
you don't like the circles.
No, the circles are weird. I mean, it doesn't imply a.
Worked so hard on
trail.
those circles, John.
I'm sure you did.
I did
Alex,
that
But
5 years ago, though. So
right, there's got to be a better graphic.
yeah.
Footprints.
Don't,
Bobcat
don't
print.
exclude any trail users. Joe, you're in charge here. Sorry. Where do you want to go next?
Home,
You're in charge here, Joe.
I'll be honest.
We gotta get this done. We gotta get it done.
Well, we're not,
we do.
I
You're not
mean,
going to get this all
we're
done tonight.
not getting this done.
We haven't even gotten to Andrea's stuff yet.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how the board feels, but given that it's, it's the night before Thanksgiving, I think that,
I gotta go back and put my pie in the oven.
there you go.
And then wait for it to be done before I can do
There you
the
go.
bed.
Well, maybe we can.
So we pick it up next time?
Yeah.
December, whatever that is.
I mean, if we had 20 people give us different suggestions, we
How
still
long
would
do
go
you
through
think?
every single one of them?
Yes. My personal
He
opinion,
makes you do it.
my personal opinion is
Particularly if
that
they're
it,
in writing.
I mean, we've asked for community input. If they actually give us input, which is a great thing,
Right.
Right, but
then
we
we
could
owe
do
it to
it,
'em to-
we could read it ourselves, and if we came up with something we thought we wanted changed, then we could say it.
I think,
I mean, this could take us forever.
No. that would take us forever.
Some of us aren't
That's a-
prepared, sorry.
I know you guys are.
So you did make it
Not
through
the
the,
same
you did
as
make it
me.
through the public hearing comments, the RPC comments, and several of the written comments. But yeah, you're gonna need all of your next meeting to get through
Yeah.
the rest of the written
The rest of it.
comments.
Hey.
Especially Andrea's, they're very substantive.
Andrews are very substantive, Barbara's are kind of long.
Well, let's be clear, Barbara's are just one planning commissioner reacting to comments,
Yeah.
not a member of the public.
I understand,
She'll
Um,
be at your next meeting, she can speak for herself.
Yeah.
I
And
got one
I have
email.
a additional goal that I want to propose.
Oh,
next
that's
time,
right, Maggie
so.
has another monkey wrench.
Monkey wrench.
And I got one comment from the public just sent to me, which I haven't sent to you yet, but it's small.
So Dennis, what do
That's
you,
the trail.
what do you wanna suggest to your fellow commissioners they do before the next meeting such that this can go as efficiently as possible?
I mean, I guess it's not that bad because we only have a few, but I mean, I'm just saying
If we had a
If we
100
had.
more, yeah, this might not be the most efficient way to get through public comment.
well, I respect everybody's comments, but it's not, I'm the type of person someone can comment on, doesn't mean I'm gonna do anything about it, you know what I mean?
Right, happy to listen, not always gonna
Yeah,
take
not
action as a
agree.
result.
Well,
I mean, we spent a lot of time on this plan too, so, I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's what you're finding in some of our decisions tonight,
yeah, we are.
because we don't.
I'm
we
just
don't
wondering
act
if we
on
could
it.
just read it and if you guys have anything you want changed on this one? Nope. I don't know.
All right, so let's do more prep, and if we can stay focused next meeting, maybe maybe we can.
I just find it very hard to skip back and forth between multiple documents.
Mhm.
I try and feed in here about, everybody's got something different. It's,
Well, certainly we should all read through the community
sounds
comments
like we
before
have.
we come to the
I think
meeting.
we're
and
having a
think
pretty
we
good.
have done
Yeah,
that.
have a sense of what you wanna do with them, I think is what
Yeah,
Dennis
and
is
then
saying.
Come and, yeah, right, have a position, but bring it to the meeting to settle it.
I think that, with all respect, Dennis, I think that the dialogue is helpful for me anyways, to hear all of you bicker and argue and agree and not, so, and that can't happen unless you do go through them and have the conversation, as laborious as it can be.
Yep. That's what the board does.
Now, we've only talked about the public hearing part of our meeting from 2 weeks ago. There was also one other item, the solar array.
I think we're done, we're done. What we
Did
decided at
approve
the
that?
end, what we decided
there's
at
a
the end of that
draft.
meeting was that Alex would put together a draft. It was actually
Which he
due
did.
the 22nd, so it was due
It's already been
Tuesday.
sent to the Public
It's been
Service
sent.
Board. Yeah.
Okay.
He sent drafts to
I
us.
gave you
Yeah,
a November 21st
Right.
deadline to get me comments, and I heard from Jeff and Joe and Maggie. And, yeah, you had said something, but it
I
wasn't
already
related to
said
that, it
something
was
before,
about
right.
minutes, so. Yep, the comments went. Well, actually, I think I copied all of you on the final
Yeah.
You
one
did.
that
Yes,
went
you
out.
did.
Yeah.
Right. The only other thing that we talked about that evening was you had two items at the end. One was the notification from A&R about
Oh,
a
right.
permit that was needed
Yep.
for the property out on Baldwin Road.
Mhm.
That had to do with a wetland.
Right, the Tebow,
Right.
development. Yep.
I think how it's stated in the minutes is backwards.
Right.
It went from
Let's-
being a class
Let's do the
3
minutes.
to being
Yes.
2.
Barbara
So-
caught that, I already
Okay.
gave Don that correction,
And I sent you, I
And
went
you-
out
yes.
and looked at it, and
yes.
I am amazed that they classified that as a class 2.
I am a little surprised at that as well.
I mean, if
pretty
you guys,
small.
it is very small and it is isolated. You can even look at the contours on the map that was submitted as part
Yep.
of the application to allow them to rebuild the connector for their road. It's a totally isolated area. It doesn't feed into a drainage area that goes down to Lewis Creek or anything.
It is
And
not
it's
for us to
small.
question
I
the
know.
wisdom of the state and their
Well,
wetland classification.
I think I may just as a citizen write to Laura Lapierre and ask her, how
Why?
is it
Yeah.
that this became a class 2? It's phenomenally mysterious to me. I mean, it's just the vegetation.
So can I turn our attention to minutes from last
Please.
meeting?
So FYI, I did give Don a couple of typographical corrections, including a substantive one that that you just talked about.
Yep.
All right, any other revisions, corrections? I didn't see any the first time I looked at this. You have a motion?
I move we approve the minutes of November 9th.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions?
I wasn't there, so.
One abstention.
Okay, so,
Where does that leave you?
leaves us with less than a quorum.
Yeah. Well,
Hmm.
I'm gonna imagine that all of you were conscientious in reviewing them, so I approve.
You'll vote with the majority.
I'll vote with the majority.
Okay, thank you. All right, minutes are approved. Other business, Alex?
Only the town of Shelburne, somewhat humorous zoning change that I forwarded you.
Let's
Uh,
not get into that.
Right, and they're having a hearing on December 15th if you're interested in that level of entertainment, gentlemen or otherwise. And just an FYI that the budget process has begun for the next fiscal year, FY 17-18. The select board is beginning that process. And I need to have the planning budget to the town administrator by the end of next week. So normally I come to you and say, hey, this is what I think we're gonna be doing over the next 18 months, and I haven't had time to do that. So, I guess, without turning this into a long conversation, if you individually as commissioners, have some ideas about where projects that you would like to see us working on over the next 18 months and funding that might need to go with that, let me know. Otherwise, I'm gonna do what I get paid for and plan that.
Saying general plan, I think the one thing we always talk about is general rewrite and consolidation of.
Right, so to give you an update, last year at this time when we talked about our work plan, the one big project we were gonna do was this complete overhaul of the zoning. And we put money in the budget, that got approved. We went to the Regional Planning Commission and said, we need your help, they said yes. And it all hinges on getting a municipal planning grant from the state, and we applied for that this fall. So we'll hear in a matter of weeks as to whether we get the state money we need to make that project go. If we do get that money, then that will be the lion's share of your work, at least through,
Okay.
the first 2/3 of next year. But remember, fiscal year 17 that we're budgeting for doesn't start until July. So you have to look out even further as to, what are we gonna do in addition to that project? So things like, we've talked about a lot of things in the past, so updating the official map, I think needs to be on there. What are some of the other ones? Oh, the RR1 and the shoreline district, finishing, the zoning revisions for those. I'm not sure that those require funding, but time and energy.
Without getting into a long discussion, since I haven't been here through that, what we were spending money for, what do we spend money for? Your salary?
No, so that's a good question, John. Wait, I should take that back. Yes, we spend most of the planning budget on personnel,
Right,
but that's sort of non-discretionary. The discretionary money that we bicker about each year and try to argue with the select board are for special projects where we're gonna hire a consultant to help us do X. So for example, the Affordable Housing Committee last year asked for $4,000 to update the housing needs assessment that was done in 2010.
but
Select
that's
board,
their money, not
it
our
is,
money.
it's going to be
Right.
in the planning budget, they appear in the planning budget. The planning budget is bigger than just the planning commission, I guess is what I should be telling you.
Okay,
So they'll be asking for that again, and I told them I would go to bat for them and make sure that was in the budget and explain to the select board why that was important. But from a planning commission standpoint, usually it's the special projects line item that covers whatever, one or two projects that your commission wants to be working on that we don't have staff capacity to complete. We need to bring some consultant horsepower in, or, for example, perhaps if we do a complete zoning rewrite, we had a budget for a legal review, which would make a lot of
that's not gonna
sense.
happen in a year.
Well, but remember, this
I mean,
is
a year and a half
a year and a half.
from now,
Maybe.
maybe.
We might get to a point where it's ready for a legal review in a year and a half.
And this money, this discretionary money, we have to justify to the
Yep,
select
you
board
got it.
for them to.
Yep,
get
it becomes
approval.
part of
It's
the
not
book, my
just-
budget
right.
proposal and the narrative and, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, like I said, let me know if there are specific things, or if you just wanna sit with me or, curious, whatever. Otherwise, I'm gonna put together the first crack at it, get it to the town administrator by the deadline, the end of next week, and then, the way it typically works is the select board will get a presentation from each department head at a particular meeting, and then you're all welcome to come and help defend the budget or not, or.
So if you put something together that you're gonna send to Trevor, you'll send to us also.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
we'll see what you're proposing
Yep,
for our budget.
yep,
Okay.
yep. That's all I have.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Thank you, everybody.